All right, gang. So back at it, and like I said in the last video, right at the end, we're going to finish learning objective 1 and 3 here, okay? So this is just a more just kind of externalized look at what all these vessels look like, especially kind of just trying to take cross sections of them, okay? I want to go really quick and just draw a quick arrow, kind of signifying the direction that all this is. So remember heart's here. Heart is the origination place for pumping all the blood. So we'll say this. If the heart's here, it's going to come here. It's going to go into the largest artery. As it goes throughout the body, the artery size is going to decrease. It's going to keep decreasing until it's called something called an arteriole. And remember, it goes to the capillary. And then after the capillary, it becomes a venule, so the smallest vein. And then as it starts going back up towards the heart through the example inferior vena cava, as it's given in the picture here, it's going to become a medium vein. And as it goes really far up to the heart, like basically approaching the heart, it's going to be called something called a large vein. Okay, so the inferior vena cava, for example. And then it's going to enter back in the heart, and it just starts this process all over again. So arrow here. We'll just draw some additional arrows just to, oh God, that was bad. We'll just draw some additional arrows here just to kind of signify the pathway that we're flowing here. All right, so let's start from the aorta, all right, and let's work our way around, okay? So we have a very, very large artery here, okay? And in this one, you can see all three of the layers. Let's zoom in a little bit. You can see all three layers of the vessel, okay? So remember, we have the tunica interna, the most internal layer, tunica media, tunica externa, okay? There are a couple things I want to point out here, okay? Every single vessel here is going to have a basement membrane, okay? Think of the basement membrane as kind of being like the structural framework, so the scaffolding that kind of holds things together, the blueprints, okay? Without the basement membrane, there wouldn't be any existence of these vessels, so it's really important to have a basement membrane because it's the scaffolding for all these structures to begin with, all right? That's all I really talk about down here. I think this one is probably the best one to talk about, all right? The medium artery. So 3 layers once again. Let's see, get those guys marked for you. We have our basement membrane, as we know about. We have the endothelium, remember, which is a part of the tunica interna, right? And then we have these extra things over here called the internal elastic lamina and the external elastic lamina, okay? These things are kind of like the dividing points. So the internal elastic lamina divides the tunica interna from the tunica media, okay? And then the external elastic lamina separates the tunica media from the tunica externa, okay? But there's another thing you guys should take note of in this, and that's the elastic part of it, okay? Remember, arteries have the most elastic tissue out of all the blood vessels, okay? And that's because it needs to be able to reduce all of the pressure fluctuations from the heart, okay? So the reason we have these is one reason to divide the different tissues, all right? The different layers, I should say, of the artery. And the other reason is because of this elastic component. This is what allows the arteries to expand and then go back to the original shape that they were when it's under the high pressure fluctuation, okay? So those two guys right there. As we move a little bit further down, we get to the arteriole, which is the smallest of all the arteries before it enters the capillary. Nothing really too important to mark here. Just note that it's getting a little bit smaller. We can see that obviously the sizes of these are growing thinner. We can see all the layers here. It doesn't mark the elastic lamina or the internal elastic laminae here, but just note that they're there. And then of course we get to the capillary, okay? And remember, we don't have any fancy schmancy layers here for this guy because we want to have as least as possible. So all we have, endothelium, basement membrane, allows for easy diffusion, okay? That's all you got to know for the capillary, all right? And then as the blood is drained from into the capillary, it's going to become into a venule, turn into a venule. So we have our layers here once again, tunica interna, media, externa. We have our basement membrane, the scaffolding. Remember, it's in every single different type of blood vessel. Endothelium on the inside of the interna. And then as we start moving a little more proximal towards the heart, one thing we can note here is we finally are starting to get some valves here, okay? Remember, that's to prevent the backflow of blood. We see that in the heart, but we also see that in veins, okay? And then as we move up closer towards the heart, we have everything here, all right? We have the 3 layers, of course, once again. basement membrane, endothelium. Okay, so that's pretty much all we got to really talk about with this this figure here. Okay, just get a good understanding of this. Remember, the arteries will always have this elastic lamina. Veins will always have the the valves here to prevent the backflow of blood. Okay, so we can move on from there. In this one here, we have some stains. So this is a stained image of an artery. This is a stained image of a vein. So as you can kind of see this really strong ring here, remember the elastic tissue retains the elastic property, so it always will go back to the same shape, and that's what this is, okay? That's that elastic laminae that I'm talking about. So arteries have that really, really rigid structure to it. That's because it needs to reduce the pressure fluctuations. All right, and remember the heart and the veins, or I'm sorry, remember the arteries and the veins both have these elastic structures, okay? Just remember they're more prominent, they're more numerous in the arteries, okay, compared to the veins. So the veins have very few layers of them, okay? So you're basically comparing $1,000 worth of these elastic layers to $1 worth of an elastic layer in it. And it specifies here as well, okay? It also specifies here. So few here, okay, and then several layers here, all right? Once again, heart here. We'll draw our arrow going all the way around. Okay. We'll draw our little assistance arrows just to kind of note the direction that blood will be flowing through here. All right. Good. Awesome. Large artery. Okay. Low resistance. Okay. High pressure. Low resistance, but very high pressure because it's right here, right after the heart. Has a lot of conducting vessels. Remember, several elastic layers. Remember we had the external, internal laminae, elastic laminae. Has the endothelium on the inside, of course. Many layers of smooth muscle and connective tissue. All right. And then we move on to arterioles. These are the main resistance vessels, so they control the distribution of blood flow. Okay. So this is kind of like as we're getting into like the brachial artery or the radial artery, they can constrict or dilate depending on if more blood is needed in those areas. So that's what the smooth muscle cells will do here. They'll allow for constriction or dilation of these vessels if it needs to increase more blood into that specific area. Okay. Then we have the capillaries, of course. So remember, nothing too really important here. We have the endothelial cells and we have the lumen. Okay. But of course, this is the area where we have exchanging of gases, fluids, nutrients, waste products, secretory products from cells. Everything that needs to be exchanged happens in this area, all right? And then we move on to the venules, all right? So something to really take note of here, which wasn't really mentioned earlier in this lab, white blood cells released into tissues during inflammation and infection. What this is all it's trying to say is that this is where a lot of that stuff is drained into, okay? So white blood cells released into tissues during inflammation and infection are usually drained into these venules, okay? And capacitance vessels means that they're big reservoirs for that. So they hold a lot of blood, right? So they hold a lot of blood. We can see that in the large vein here. They hold a lot of blood products as they're bringing it back up to the heart. Honestly, veins hold more blood compared to the arteries. And that's just because when blood is drained, sometimes it doesn't reach the heart as quick as the arteries are pushing, or as the heart is pumping out to the other, organs and muscles in our body. That sometimes it doesn't make it up to the heart as quick as it flows through these structures, which is why we say they're high capacitance vessels, because they hold a lot of volume, okay? So that's all you got to really know here for this guy. Has endothelium, has a connective tissue, of course. It has the lumen, all right? So it has everything we need to know there. And then, of course, we have our vein here, okay? So the very large vein, very few elastic layers, okay? So, if it had a lot, it would have basically a similar structure to the aorta, but it does not have many, okay? It does not have many elastic layers, so which is why it kind of collapses on itself, as we see in the stain up here. Has the endothelium, very, very large lumen, okay? Few layers of smooth muscle and connective tissue, all right? And this is a place where there's a lot of, there's low resonance, but it's high capacitance, so it's high storing, okay? And that goes back into the heart here, all right? So figure 3.1, 3.2 here. And off of that, I think that we can go ahead and cross off Number 1, because we just talked about the structural difference between arteries, capillaries, and veins. Let's see, and identify the indicated blood vessels on the images. Yeah, I guess we kind of did half. Let's do half of that one. And the reason being is because we obviously have to talk about all of the other arteries and vessels. So we'll say we did half. We did half of this one. Okay. All right. So that's it here. I'm going to stop here. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about the portal systems. Okay. Kind of talk about what that is. And then we'll go from there.